This week we're going to be going back to decimals and fractions and kind of talking about the relationships between those two things. So y'all will have seen stuff like this before, but I recommend we still go through it because the lessons for the rest of the week will kind of build on this. Okay, so when you see models like this, the first thing you're going to notice, and the first thing you'll notice with these first two, are the number of parts that make up each of these wholes. So with this one, there are much fewer parts, right? So we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts to the whole. So if you're going to create a fraction for it, you already know what your denominator is because we figured out how many parts make up that whole. So your denominator is going to be 10. Now how many are shaded in? We can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this model represents 6 over 10. Okay, how do we turn that into a decimal? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to think about place value a little bit. So this denominator actually indicates to you which place value we're using. So this is a 10, so that means we're dealing with tenths. So this 6 is a tenths place value, and that's because there are 10 parts to this whole. Okay, so if we're going to make it a decimal, remember that the tenths place is right after the decimal point, so this would be 0.6. Okay, and then when it comes to word form, we would just literally write that this is 6 tenths. And you spell tenths a very similar way to how you spell 10. It's just T-E-N, and then you add THS to the end of it. That's your suffix for that word. Okay, let's look at one more. So we already talked about the difference. There are going to be many, many more parts here. We kind of see that, you know, we still have the up-down columns, but each of these is split into how many pieces? It's split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each tenth is now split into 10 different pieces. So one way to find out how many parts we have in a whole, y'all might know this already, but one quick way to do it is see that vertically you have 10, horizontally you have 10, so you can find its area. 10 times 10 is 100. So there are 100 parts in this whole. So for the fraction, we're going to go ahead and put 100 as our denominator because 100 little squares make up that whole thing. Now let's see how many parts are shaded in. First thing you want to do is just see how many tenths are fully shaded in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths fully shaded in. So I'm going to already put a 5 here, but how many little squares do we have after that? After that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we have 58 spaces out of 100 shaded in. Okay, so in other words, we have 58 hundredths. This is 58 hundredths. So for my decimal, I can go ahead and draw my decimal point. I don't have a whole, so there will be nothing to the left of the decimal point. But here, I can go ahead and just write 0.58. So 0.58, that's our decimal. Okay, and if we look at place value, we see that we have the 5 in the tenths because there are 5 entire tenths, and then we have 8 in the hundredths. But when we use the word form, we actually only call this hundredths, okay? So we're going to actually write 58. You do that little dash between the tenths and the hundredths value. Okay, so 58 hundred with THS at the end, just like 10 with THS at the end. So this is 58 hundredths. Okay, attached to this assignment, y'all are going to see the bottom two here. I want you to go ahead on your own paper, go ahead and complete these models, naming the fraction, the decimal, and then the word form, and you can use the top two as a guide.